Hi everyone, welcome to a video tutorial on the key concepts behind AnyDB. As you might know, AnyDB is a very flexible, object-based business database that allows you to manage business records and processes across your teams, clients, and partners. So let's get right into it. All right, number one, AnyDB is an object-based database, and it's very different from typical databases seen in IT systems. How does this work? Imagine you're a car manufacturer and you're building cars, and you want to store these cars in your database. It's not that simple. A car has thousands of parts. So if you take a car and look at sub-items or sub-components, you can actually break it up into assemblies of an engine, wheels, struts, suspension, and so on. And then you could keep going. If you take a wheel, you could break it up into other subcomponents. And this keeps going on and on and on. So a car could have thousands of items. Now, typical databases, the way they work is that you would create a table for storing one type of thing. Let's say wheels. You would have a table with just wheels. Or you would create a table to store all your car frames or only your engines. Now, if you wanted to now connect this all together into a car and try to understand which component went into the car, if you take, let's say, car number one, you will have to link this car with all the wheels from the wheels table. And then you have to also link to the frame in the frames table. Similarly, you got to do this for the engine in the engine table. While this works, it can get very complex when you have lots of parts and all these parts are connected via these deep hierarchical sub-assemblies. And this is where AnyDB comes in. In AnyDB, we have objects. And what is an object? Well, an object is an entire system. So if you take a car in AnyDB is going to be a full object that contains the car along with the frame, the engine, and the wheels together. Now, if you have another car, it's going to be another car object with a frame object, engine object, and other wheels connected with that car, and so on. Now, note that if the wheels have subcomponents, then the subcomponents will be attached inside this whole object, and then everything is connected together. So how does it work in AnyDB? Well, if you have a car in AnyDB, the way you would build it is you would have a car record, and then you would attach a frame object or a record to that particular car. And then you would go and attach an engine object or a record to the car object. And then you would do the same for all the wheels. This is how you would model things in AnyDB. Now, what exactly is the objects here? Well, first of all, the car is an object. Then the frame is also an object. The engine is an object. And finally, all the wheels are objects too. So what you can see is that the objects that we have created are all having subcomponents, and they're all connected to each other through these attachments. You can keep expanding this. So imagine your car manufacturer and you're building all these cars out of your factory. You could take all these cars and attach these car records to your factory record, and then now you know this factory has manufactured all these cars. But then you could keep extending this, because now you could take these factories and attach them to a region record for a particular country or a continent. And you could keep going like that, where you could now take all of your regions and then connect them to a global, overall sales let's say, revenue. Now, the properties of objects in AnyDB allow some interesting behaviors. If you have a car object, you can connect it to a factory, for example. But then, let's say you want to track all your luxury car segment and you had a different system for that. You could connect the same car record or attach it to the luxury system. Now, if you wanted to track all the sedans that you're manufacturing, you could take the same car and attach it to the sedans list. So a same car, a car record, or an object in this case, can be attached to many different things, not just to one thing. So coming back to all of this and tying this all together, if you go back to AnyDB, the way you would model this, you will have a car record, and there will be frames, engines, wheels as records as part of the car record. These are all attached to it. Now, going from the analogy of cars to a real-world business system, let's think about how it works. Here on my right-hand side, I have a CRM. And in this CRM, I have a company record, which contains contacts, many number of deals, a lot of different logs for call logs, invoices, and maybe even many number of files that I've attached to this company. You can see already this is very flexible, allows you to build a structure that expands to what you need. Tomorrow, after you design this, you realize you need to track an additional set of data along with this company. It's very simple to extend. So now seeing this, let's see how this works in the real world inside AnyDB. I'm going to show you an example CRM company. Okay, so we have our CRM dashboard and I have one company here. I'm going to go ahead and open this company up. And as soon as you open this company up, you can see this is a CRM company record. And here you have deals, contacts, and invoices. And they're all attached to this company. To see these attachments in one chart, you can always click on the Attachments tab over here, and you'll see all of these records that are attached to this. So I could open up one of these attached records that are connected to the overall CRM company record. And it's very straightforward to attach new things. Say, let's say I want to attach a file. I click on Attach, click on New, select a file, and then click on Drag and Drop, and then you can select a label. And as soon as you do that, it's attached to it, and that's how simple it is to attach a file, particular record. So with that, let's go to the key concept number 2. All right, number 2, organization. So AnyDB has, databases, but they're organized in a specific way. Let's take a look at that. So AnyDB data is organized per teams. Teams are a collection of people, typically for an organization or a larger group within a bigger organization. And what happens is you will add all your members inside a team, and they'll have access to certain parts of AnyDB. Just because they're in a team doesn't mean they have access to everything. Once you have a team, you can have any number of databases that you can create for that team. Each database is a logical partitioning of data as well as permissions and people so that they all connected together. So you can create one, let's say, for a HR team, one for your sales team, one for your marketing team. And each database will individually contain any number of records inside as part of it. Now, this setup allows you a very flexible way to organize information. For example, if you have a company, you could have databases for IT and support, sales and CRM, and marketing, and so on. Each database can have any number of people inside it, and you can have folders and tables for tracking different things inside the database. For example, you could have an IT and support database that tracks your help desk tickets, IT assets, and maybe even software licenses, and they could all be in the same database. Now, just because they're in the same database doesn't mean that everybody in that database will have access to all of that data. You can still partition each of that sections inside the database and organize it with permissions so that only some people have access to certain parts of the system. This can be extended all the way up to a full-fledged enterprise organization where you have layers with operational access, people with management level access who take the data that the operations teams are creating and build dashboards on top of that. And then at the executive level, you get higher level KPIs and metrics all the way up to the, let's say, the executive C-level officers who get top level dashboards, OKRs and goals, and so on and so forth. So this allows you to build a very flexible system inside AnyDB. Now, if you have multiple companies, you can take this even further by connecting your company dashboard with other companies' data. So let's say your company, you have access to other companies' data. They have actually invited you to their team or shared some data with you. You can connect that data to your internal company data as long as you have permission. And then as that vendors or subsidiary companies, other company data changes, your company's data dashboards will also instantly change. All right, number 3, templates. AnyDB's records that you've seen before are created from templates. So if you want to create a particular object or a record, you first have to define how that object or record looks like. In this example, we have an AnyDB template for a customer record. And you can see it's kind of like a form, and it has all the fields that you want a customer to have. And this is very flexible. You can build a very complex record or a simple one depending on your needs. Once you have your template, you can create any number of customers from the template. And these are records inside AnyDB. If you want to make a change, you will add a new field to this template, and that new field will now be added to all these records when they are migrated. And that's how templates work. So templates in AnyDB are designed in a spreadsheet-like interface. You would move around, click on these cells, and then type in the type of data you want to store. You would give it a name or a label if you want to. And here's how it looks in AnyDB. So you see the familiar Excel-like interface, a spreadsheet-like interface with rows and columns. You can see the columns with A, B, C, rows with 1, 2, 3, 4. This is giving you the position. And for each one of them, you can specify a label, with this case name, and this is going to be a value. And you can have different types of cells. For example, this particular cell in A6 is going to be a file. So you can actually upload a file into that particular cell. Now, let me show you an example of a template in action. All right, so inside AnyDB, let's look at how to create a template. So you click on New Database. Let's create a new database. And then let's create a new template. And you can create a template using AI or create something from scratch. And in this case, I'm going to go build something from scratch. So click on Build New, create a new template, and it's going to open the template designer, which looks like a spreadsheet. Now you can go ahead and type in what you want. So I'm going to hit F2, type in the name, because that's going to be my name, and this is going to be my age, and this is going to be my date of birth. And this one, I want to be a date field, so I can go back and select the type as date, and I'm going to set the type as this format. And I can also preview how this is going to look, and that's going to be how I'm going to type in the values, with my date of birth being a selector for the date. And then once you're happy with this template, you just hit save. Let's create this as a person template, and let's hit save. And then what we're going to do is go ahead and create a new person from that particular template. So we're going to click on new record, and we're going to select the template type to be the person that we created. And as soon as we do that, we get that record that we can enter now. and let's pick some date and so on. And that's your record, and that's how you create a template and make new records from that template. Well, AnyDB supports flexible ways of connecting records together, and attachments are one form of that. The other major way is through a traditional link that you normally associate in or see in IT systems or typical databases, and that's linking via reference. To do that, you can think of a record being directly connected to another record, not through an attachment, but through a link. Now, what is an example or a use case for this? Imagine you have a car document, maybe title of registration or a title, and some important document that links to your car. Now, the car document and cars may not be directly connected to each other as an object. You don't really think they are actually parts of something whole. So you never want to really connect a car document with a car. But you still would like to get some information from the car into this document. So for example, once you select the car, you want to get the properties of this car, like the color or maybe the engine. So in your car document, once you select and link a car, you want to see the color of the car or the engine size. How do we do this in AnyDB? Well, the way you do this in AnyDB is by selecting a cell and making it a reference type. So let's go and look at an example quickly. So in record 1, let's say we have a cell B1. Let's make that a reference type. And now we are able to select a particular record of any type, and we can just connect it to from that. Now let's assume that record 2 has a value of A1 with 3000, and let's say you want to get that data inside your record 1. Well, how can you do that? Is by using a very simple formula called the dynamic ref. And all you do is in another cell that you want to refer to the value in the record 2, you would say D2 equal to dynamic ref from that cell B1, and you would get the value of BA1 from the record. And that's a formula that will give you the value 3000. So, and this is dynamically connected. So if you change the value 3000 here, it's going to make a change automatically to this number. Now, in the future, let's say you decide that you want to actually make a change to which record you are connected to from this record. Let's say you now point to a different record. You can make the change to this reference and the value automatically updates as well. So this is very powerful to select and create a link from one record to another record without them being a part of an attachment or being part of a hierarchy of objects. All right, let's show you a quick example of using references. So this is an employee record, and you can see this employee has a link to the last performance review here, right here. And if I go ahead and click on this link, I can open up the employee performance review, and it's a performance review with the overall rating over here. Going back to the employee, you can also see that their latest review rating is also highlighted here. And it's coming from this connected record. So if I go back to this record and then go ahead and change this value, let's say to be below expectations, you can change this below expectations, go back to the record, and this automatically now updates to show it's below expectations. And the reason it's working is because it's using the connection from this linked record and getting the data from the overall rating. So we can see that very quickly by going to the sheet mode, clicking on the cell, looking at the formula, and that says dynamic ref B7, which is this particular record, and then D2 is the value of the performance review data inside that particular record. And this is how references work. Okay, number 5, connecting everything. So AnyDB is extremely powerful because not only is it an object-based database, it can allow you to connect any arbitrary record cell data to any other record cell data. And this allows you to have data flowing continuously without any manual work. So if you have operational data that's coming in from, let's say, one of your logistics centers, that data can automatically update a dashboard to your manager, and from that manager to a next level manager, and so on. Let's take a look at how that works. Now, if you take, for example, a typical record, in this case, it's an employee record, every single thing that you can see in this record can be connected to another record easily, whether it's a cell value or whether it's the status value, assignment value, the badges, the follow-up date and time, or whether it's even locked or unlocked. Every single thing that you can see here can be connected to another cell from another record. And this is really powerful because the moment you're able to do this, it allows you to build these systems where if you have one record, they can now drive automatic real-time updates to all parts of a system inside a company. So let's take a look and see how that works. Now, as you might know, if you want to connect a particular cell data with another cell data, and you might have learned this in Excel, it's really easy. If you want to connect to another cell in Excel, you just type in the cell address, which is going to be A1 or A2, or the cell position. And then as that cell changes, the other cell also changes. So in AnyDB, it's the same. So if you have a cell reference, let's say, you can refer to that cell within the same record by using its position, which can be A1, B1, or B3, just like Excel or Google Sheets, or by its name, if you have a name for that cell. And when you do that, you got to use the double curly braces and then the name between them to refer to that. Now, this is very straightforward if you're inside the same record. But what happens if you want to connect it from a different record? Well, to connect it from a different record, you got to specify a lot more information on what this record is, which database it's part of, and maybe sometimes even which team it's part of. So to refer to a particular cell, you can actually have to use a different level of addressing. So let's go into that. So first of all, to refer to any cell in a general way, you got to know what team it's part of, which database it's part of, which record you are talking about, and then the cell value. So to refer to a value of any cell, if you have to think about the team, the database, the record, and the cell, it's going to be provided in a format that looks like this. You specify team at, and then the team ID, D at, and the database ID, O at, which is going to be the record ID, and then finally the cell. Now, we separate all of this using the exclamation mark, which is a separator. But with the reference like this, you can connect any cell to any other cell, provided you have the permissions to do that. And therefore, when that cell value changes, your value will also change. Now, in addition to using references like this, you can also use value of the name of the cell if you can, but you have to use the double curly braces here. Now, let me show you how to get that data easily. You might be asking, okay, how do I get the team ID, the database ID, and then object ID or the record ID? If you open up any record, if you go back to the details view and click on IDs, you can see there's a copy team ID, database ID, and the item ID or the record ID, and that gives you this IDs of all of this particular record. There's also a shortcut to copy references very quickly. So let's say you want to get this data from this cell. You just right click on this, go to the reference, and you can see there's an absolute section over here. And that's, if you just click on this copy, it's going to copy the reference over there, and it's going to look like this. And that's how it looks like. And you can see the same sections that I'm going to just separate out right here. You can see that it's easier to read this way. So there's a team ID, a database ID, the record ID, and then the actual cell position. Now that you've seen, you can connect a cell using its reference to any other cell in any other record inside your team database, however you want to connect them. But because AnyDB is a object-based database, and the natural form of objects is that you have an object and then attached objects to that, most of the times you want to be able to collect information or access information from the attachments. So let's look at an example. Let's say you have a parent object and you're going to have child objects, and these are 3 child objects. And you want to actually be able to get the sum of all the payments from all the child objects. How would you do that? Well, the way you would do that is using a syntax for referring to the children items within from parent. Well, the formula looks like you want to get the children of a particular record and then the which cell it is. So for this object, you're going to say C at and then the record ID and then the cell name or the position that you want to get the data for. Now, this record ID, sometimes you don't know what it is ahead of time. And if you want to refer to yourself, which is useful if you're building a template ahead of time that doesn't know what it's going to be, what its ID is going to be, there's a special way to refer to the current record all the ways by using this current rec shortcut, and that always refers to the current record's ID. So what we are saying here is get me all the children of this current record and get me the values from the cell B5. Let's look at an example. Imagine you are the parent record and we have these three attachments, record 1, 2, and 3, with cells A1 from all of these records. And each of them have the value 3,000, 4,000, and 5,000. Say you want to get the sum of all of these values in your parent. The formula is going to be sum of C at current record of A1, and that gives you a formula that returns the value 12,000 automatically. Now, if you ever change these values in the attachments, this is going to update. At the same time, if you add another attachment, automatically this value will also update with the value from A1 from this new record. Now, you can do the same thing with getting data from parents from a child record. So suppose you're a child record and you want to get some data from its parents. It's pretty straightforward. Let's assume you are the child object and you are attached to, let's say, 4 parents. Remember, we talked about the fact that you can attach a record to multiple other records. What's going to happen is to get the data from its parent, it's going to have the formula where you say A at record ID and B5. And again, instead of typing in the record ID, you can say current rec of B5. And this is going to return back to you the values from these parents of the value B5 cell, which is going to be, let's say, 4 numbers. And you can use a sum or average to do anything with it. So with that, we're going to come to the end of this particular video tutorial on key concepts. See you next time.